What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, it's Monday. You know what time it is. It's time to go over the top waiver wire ads as we head into week 5. There may not be as many high-end options as there were a week ago, but if you lost some players, there are some pieces on the waiver wire that you could add with plenty of upside. Before we do get into the video though, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which wide receiver through 3 weeks currently leads the league in yards after catch per reception. The correct answer was actually Robert Woods. Eddie Hall, you got this one right. As for today's stat of the day, in week 4, which wide receiver with at least 5 targets posted the best catch rate for week 4? Once again, that's which wide receiver in week 4 posted the best catch rate, must have at least eclipsed 5 targets. Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Also, guys, with injury news weighing so heavily on which players we're targeting off the waiver wire, it's very likely that this news will change throughout the week. So to stay fully up to date on which players we want to target in which order, the best way to do that is to go to our website. We're constantly updating it. There you can also access our rankings, trade model, DFS picks, sports betting picks, and more. So if that interests you, go to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Link as always in the description box below. With that out of the way, let's hop right into the running backs. We'll start with the high-owned running backs, and to lead this list is obviously Joshua Kelley. Joshua Kelley will be taking over the Austin Eckler role. The extent of his injury is unknown at this point, but at least it's going to keep him out several weeks. And until Eckler does return healthy, Joshua Kelley should be able to post high-end RB2 numbers, back-end RB1 numbers, because his skill set does bode well for a pass-catching running back as well as a very talented rusher. This type of production you can't normally get off the waiver wire, and considering he's only owned in about 57% of leagues, there's a shot out there that one of you guys can grab him. Behind him we have Devonta Freeman. He's currently owned in about 56% of leagues. My excitement for his overall upside is starting to drift away with each and every week. This Giants offense doesn't look to be able to support even consistent RB2 numbers with a running back with a full workload, but that's presumably what we will end up getting from Devonta Freeman. So if you are able to get a lead back in any offense in the NFL, you have to grab it off waivers. So that's why we have Devonta Freeman, also part of this list of must-own running backs. Moving over to the lower percentage owned running backs, we have D'Ernest Johnson, currently owned in 0% of leagues. So leagues with deep benches and waiver wire sharks, a lot of the top players just simply aren't available. D'Ernest Johnson, I know you can get him. The reason I have Johnson leading this list is more because his skill set matched up with a heir apparent replacement to Nick Chubb. They didn't use him in the receiving game. He surprisingly had more rush attempts than Kareem Hunt, so there's a very likely situation where, although Kareem Hunt's overall volume is destined to increase, it's possible that while Chubb is out, they just insert Johnson into his old role. Behind him, we have Chase Edmonds of the Arizona Cardinals, currently owned in about 25% of leagues. This is a name you hear brought up in every waiver wire video. The only thing holding him back from being the top waiver wire ad is that while Kenyon Drake did get knocked out of the contest and didn't return, the coaching staff said they were very confident that it was nothing serious. If we knew that Chase Edmonds was going to be more of a long-term rental as opposed to potentially battling touches with Kenyon Drake next week, I would be much more fond of putting my eggs in that basket. But again, the information is limited. If it does actually hold Drake out for longer than we would expect, then Chase Edmonds could be getting upwards of 20 touches as early as next week. How valuable those touches are is up for debate. We know Kenyon Drake has not been all that successful on his touches, but then again, anytime we've seen Chase Edmonds touch the ball, he's looked better than Drake. While Kenyon Drake does have a talented back like Edmonds breathing down his neck, if Kenyon Drake were to be ruled out, Chase Edmonds really doesn't have that type of competition behind him. So the amount of touches that were divvied up between Drake and Edmonds, with Drake not on the field, they may actually lean more in favor of Edmonds, thus giving him more volume in a back that presumably is more efficient. Behind him, we have Justin Jackson, currently owned in 8% of leagues. We've never been all that high on Justin Jackson as a player. We knew as soon as Joshua Kelley did get signed to the roster that Joshua Kelley was the back that we wanted to own behind Austin Eckler. But with Eckler out, we know this team does utilize a 2 running back system. Jackson received 8 touches on Sunday, and if he is going to get a somewhat sizable workload, that is going to warrant an add and somebody you should roster. Moving on, we have Dontrell Hilliard. I believe a big debate between a lot of people will be, who do I add, Dearness Johnson or Dontrell Hilliard? I myself am in the camp of Johnson because I do view Hilliard as more of a versatile player, somebody who could more fill the role of Kareem Hunt, as opposed to Johnson, who I feel like could easily just overtake that Nick Chubb role. I doubt behind Hunt they're going to be using both backs equally, which is why I am in the camp of Johnson. That's not to say that Hilliard couldn't surprise us and be the main guy behind Hunt, which does warrant an add, and him being owned in 0% of leagues means you have an opportunity to get him. The final running back we have is Travis Homer. He's currently owned in 2% of leagues. I'm not a big fan on this pick because I don't believe Carlos Hyde is going to be out for all that long. Chris Carson, while he is injured, he's already proven to do everything possible to make it back on the field. So Travis Homer, in order to hit a point where he's an every week starter, he's going to need an injury to both Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde, while also fending off DJ Dallas, who quite frankly looked pretty good on Sunday. We are going to move over to the high owned wide receivers. To start, we have Russell Gage. He's actually the only high ownership wide receiver we would suggest adding. Keep in mind this is recorded before the Monday night game. I just do expect his role to remain similar throughout the entire season. He's clearly the third option at the wide receiver slot, arguably ahead of Hayden Hurst, whose snaps have overall decreased in each consecutive game this season. And with both Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley both making it on the injury report, questionable to actually play in each game, Russell Gage is the one common denominator that actually retains his value. Moving over to the low ownership wide receivers, we have quite a sizable list. It started with Scotty Miller. Miller once again had himself a really good game. 7 targets, 5 receptions, 83 receiving yards to go along with a touchdown. Now, understandably, I know Brady threw for 5 touchdowns to 5 different receivers, but an add for Scotty Miller is more an add that Chris Godwin may not return healthy or may not return very soon, because Scotty Miller is going to instantly take over as the top receiving option behind Mike Evans. He's already proven to be very solid on a per touch basis. The chemistry he's built with Tom Brady, it's not going to go away even if Chris Godwin does return, but at this point we don't have a timetable for that. While Godwin is held out though, Miller will consistently be in flex consideration. Behind Miller we have Brandon Aiyuk. While the overall volume wasn't extremely high, he only had 5 targets, he still was able to reach the end zone because the use of Aiyuk, it's not so much as a wide receiver, it's more of a gadget player, and in a Kyle Shanahan offense where they really value the yards after catch ability of their receivers, Brandon Aiyuk fits this offense perfectly. Now that they have begun to use him consistently and we have proven that in back-to-back games, it's very difficult for me to expect his usage to go down. In fact, I would even suspect his usage to go up. Behind Aiyuk, we have Tim Patrick. I believe on most people's waiver list, this will probably be the leader when it comes to wide receiver waiver ads. And while I do like Patrick and I think he can play a role on your team, definitely being more of a depth piece you hold on the bench, I find it hard to believe that he will carve out a role in which you will feel confident starting him before Drew Lock eventually returns. But it's undeniable he has performed very well over the past 2 weeks. 11 total targets, converting that into 10 receptions, 150 plus yards, including 2 touchdowns. So obviously that's starting to warrant an add, and considering that he is only owned in under 1% of leagues, then those of you that are really desperate to fill the wide receiver position can look to Tim Patrick to fill that spot for you. Up next we have T. Higgins, and I know for a lot of people you don't want to add T. Higgins because there are are a lot of mouths to feed. I get it, but AJ Green, he's toast. T. Higgins, while we knew he was the heir apparent to the AJ Green role, I think that student surpassing the master moment is actually going to happen a lot sooner than we expected. AJ Green on a per target basis has been record-breaking horrible. Meanwhile, T. Higgins has been nothing short of amazing. He's had 16 targets over the past 2 weeks, over 115 receiving yards to go along with 2 scores. So while I'm not saying to add him and thrust him in your lineup, if you don't add him now, it's likely someone else will, and by the time he does actually break out, it'll be too late to grab him off the waivers. The next player we have is Laviska Shenault. Received once again 6 targets in back-to-back games, also a touch out of the backfield. This is more a bank on talent. DJ Chark came back, performed very, very well, while Chark and all of the other receiving weapons remain healthy. It's unlikely Laviska Shenault will get enough volume for us to trust him each and every week, but it only takes one injury. Behind him, we have Greg Ward, who I'm not all that thrilled about. This Philadelphia Eagles offense, it's pretty pitiful. Greg Ward, however, is the leading receiver, and if this offense does improve, that could potentially be a valuable role. I will, however, say that their weapons are going to begin to get more healthy, so by the time that Greg Ward actually develops into a player you could trust in your lineup, it's very likely that his target market share may not be where it was right now. But if you're in a deeper league looking for a receiver with volume, that's exactly what Greg Ward brings to the table. Lastly is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and we all know that Davante Adams, he's been banged up. Allen Lazard, he's on IR, so a bank on Marquez Valdes-Scantling is a bank on the lack of health at the receiver position for this team. We haven't really seen him take full advantage of his opportunities, but nonetheless, there are plenty of opportunities available for him. If he does hit, he's a very tall receiver with a high athletic profile, so if he really hits and really exceeds our expectations, the ceiling for him could be incredibly high. But again, don't hold your breath. He's owned in about 40% of leagues, so not available for all of you out there, but if he is on the waivers, this is a player that should be owned in all leagues. We're moving to tight ends, and there are really only 2 high-owned tight ends that I would consider players you should add if you have a free spot. That's Jimmy Graham, of course, who I know probably disappointed for whoever started him. He only had 4 receptions for 33 yards. This was on 5 targets, so not a high amount of volume either. But like I said in my tight end must start or avoid video, I don't think this is an accurate representation of his season-long value. With Nick Foles as the starter, he's not going to be forced to face a defense as strong as Indianapolis, so better games are certainly ahead, and I'd rather get a player before they pop off. That's when the overall waiver priority it will take to get them will increase, and the amount of fab it will take to get them on your roster also will increase. So getting a player like Jimmy Graham, stashing him on the bench, seeing what potentially the connection with him and Foles can be, that's the approach I would like to take. Then behind him we have Austin Hooper. He was actually ranked inside of our top 12 for, I believe, the first time this season, and this was a pretty simple matchup to predict. I think this is probably going to be one of his better games, at least in the short to near future. So if you do grab Hooper off of the waivers, don't expect to just start him every week. However, whenever a tight end performs that well, gets 7 targets in a game, in a position where volume isn't guaranteed, production no way guaranteed either, that does hold some sort of value. Moving to the low ownership tight ends, my favorite tight end, easily Dalton Schultz. He's currently owned in 33% of leagues. I picked him up everywhere possible. He has averaged 8 targets per game over the past 3 contests, scored in 2 of them, and is in one of the best offenses in the league. While his volume is nowhere guaranteed from week over week, when it comes to the tight end position where it's typically touchdown or bust, you want to get players on high-powered offenses, and that's exactly what Dalton Schultz finds himself in. He is still going to remain a matchup-based starter though, so don't expect to add him and start him every week regardless of matchup. But if you're streaming, if you're getting screwed starting tight ends and getting nothing out of it, Dalton Schultz is definitely a player you should consider. Behind him we have Alie-Cox. He's owned in 21% of leagues. We all know the talent is there with Cox, and Phillip Rivers loves to target tight ends. Even in a difficult matchup, he still was able to score a touchdown. It was his only reception of the game, but if he continues to produce when his number is called, his opportunities are likely going to increase. I would be hesitant to thrust him in the lineup. Only one game this season was he able to eclipse 3 targets, which means he's virtually reliant on scoring a touchdown and being massively efficient, which even if we do bank on his talent, it's just likely to end up screwing us over eventually. Behind Cox, we have Robert Tonyan. This is obviously a bank against the health of the Green Bay Packers receivers. We don't know exactly how skilled Tonyan is or what his target market share will be with Davante Adams back, even without Allen Lazard starting. But what we do know is that in the last game, Aaron Rodgers threw over 100 yards to the tight end position, 2 touchdowns to the position as well. And with the weapons in Green Bay diminishing with each and every week, Robert Tonyan's overall opportunity share is increasing with each day. The final tight end we have is Drew Sample, and while initially I saw everybody go out and spend all of their fab on taking the heir apparent to CJ Uzomah, we never really saw a one-to-one replacement where Drew Sample was just taking over all of that volume. While in the initial game that did happen, that game was against Cleveland. Burrow threw for 61 attempts, but regardless, Drew Sample is on an offense that will remain very pass heavy. His 5 targets last week are unlikely to be a high as well, so I certainly could see better games even in the next week's matchup against Baltimore. As for the specific talent of Drew Sample, I can't really vouch for that. It's more an opportunity over ability ad, but considering he's virtually free to add, only owned in 3% of leagues, it's essentially a no risk investment. But guys, that's going to do it. That's all the waiver ads. If you did enjoy this video, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching. Catch you on the next one.